Presidential candidates have continued to traverse the country seeking for the support of the voters. This is ahead of the 2026 general elections. Now, the ANT presidential hopeful, that is retired Major General Mugisha Muntu, has extended his presidential bid right here in West Nile sub-region. Now, he first had his entry point in the lower belt of West Nile, that is Jumani, Moyo, Obonge, and then later on he came to, that is Yombe, and then on Friday he did have his campaign rally in Koboko, and he concluded the day in Marisha district. Majority of the people here, when they were raising some of the concerns here, their concerns majorly centered on the relationship between the tax collectors and also those who pay the taxes. Here you talk about now the citizens and the authorities. And also one of the issues that they were also vividly able to raise here is some of the poverty eradication programs which have been developed by government. And one of their concerns is that most of these programs are not people-centered. There was no lesson done and research being carried in terms of the demands of the people. So these are some of the concerns here. Also not forgetting the social and economic infrastructure. We talk about the status of the schools. I want to expand this conversation and dive into better conversation to understand, as these presidential candidates converse for votes across the country, each candidate is having different strategy of ensuring that he or she convinces the voter. What is the case with the ANT's presidential candidate? Retired General, you're most welcome.
Thank you.
Well, we are seeing you in West Nile sub-region having the hunt for the votes ahead of the 2026 general elections. General, tell us what has been your general observation in terms of the trade here.
What we have encountered in the West Nile sub-region is more or less what we found elsewhere. Low levels of education, lack of jobs for the youth, deep levels of poverty, corruption. Everywhere you go, people are crying of corruption. And in West Nile, there's also the sense of marginalization. They feel that the country has completely, the government has abandoned them. There's also fear of the uncertainty as what change means. Could it cause warfare? Because they have got the negative psychological impact of having been sucked into a war situation, and they had to run out and become refugees in Sudan and Congo. So, and the regime keeps using that. It remains a shadow above them, as if General Museveni leaves, that they could end up in war. They use it for blackmail. So we keep on explaining to them that one or the other, General Museveni will leave anyway. So why do they think that the security of the country could be tagged on one individual? So we believe that they will be able to overcome that. We keep on harping on that, because there's absolutely no reason why anybody would think that when General Museveni leaves, that the country could get into problems, because he will leave one or another anyway. So people must get used to the fact that the president comes, the president goes. As to the issues of low levels of education, basically the problem is low pay for teachers. I mean, a primary school teacher is being paid 400,000 shillings. The pupils are being given government support of 28,000 shillings a year, which means it translates to 9,000 shillings a term. Why would anybody expect that the levels of education will be high with that kind of situation? What would they expect the headmasters to do with the teachers who have low motivation, pupils who basically don't have adequate support? How would the headmasters be able to get all the facilities needed? So the only way you can raise the standards of education is to motivate teachers by paying them better, and also increasing the people's support in terms of the money which is given. 28,000 really a year or 9,000 a term is peanuts. So you can't expect the headmasters to do the miraculous in those kinds of circumstances. As for lack of drugs in hospitals, the only way you can turn around that situation is stamp out corruption, and also give more support to the health sector by paying the health workers better, by ensuring that drugs are bought, and anybody who steals the drugs is arrested, prosecuted, and put into prison. but also to ensure that there is an adequate budget. The Abuja Declaration, I think of 20-something, I don't remember the year exactly, but African countries had pledged to allocate 15% of the budget to the healthcare services. We are still at around 8%. But logically, if you want a productive society, you must educate them well, you must ensure that they are healthy, and they're also well fed. But those are three areas where this regime has failed. Low levels of education, lack of medical support, and of course, in terms of food security, most of the people are really highly vulnerable. So how do you expect to sustain the development process if the labor factor itself is lacking, is wanting in terms of those three things? And of course, the other challenge that people have, the other one of marginalization, yes, if there's a disciplined government, you focus resources in terms of needs. It doesn't matter whether people have got many cabinet ministers or they don't have cabinet ministers or whatever members of parliament they have. You sit down and look at the needs of the people. Look at the infrastructure. You look at what other programs are needed in every sub-region. Then you give them adequate support in terms of budget so that you create the necessary, or put in place the necessary facilities to support areas in terms of education, in terms of health, areas which need industries. You give money to entrepreneurs who would develop. If it's like you want to build an industrial base, for example, in Arua, you put their incentives for people who come and build factories in Arua, because Arua is the natural hub here in West Nile, because it is very close to Congo. It's also close to South Sudan. That whole area of Yambio that goes up to Central African Republic, that part would trade through Uganda. And of course, the northern part of the northeastern part of Congo, their trade is through Arua to Mombasa. But when there are industries in Arua, there are many things they can produce here in Arua that would cater for those markets without people having to go all the way either to Kampala or go to Nairobi or go to Mombasa.
Maybe, General, each time presidential candidates come, yes, they give the citizen that hope, yes, that their intentions are very deliberate, yes, and they're the best candidates to shape the future of this country. But in all these candidates, neither have I had any candidate speaking about sports. When you go to Western countries, sports is one sector that is contributing greatly to these economies. I want to understand, what agenda do you have for the sports sector in terms of now making it to be very beneficial to the nation, but also to the stakeholders who are involved in the entire sector?
One of the leaders who first recognize that people are created different. We have got different intelligences. There are those who are good at academics. There are those who are good at using their hands, skills. There are those who are good at sports. So you have to rebuild a system, or establish a system where, one, you recognize those who are good, who are talented in sports at a low age. Normally it is detected between 5 years to 10 years, which means you must establish that system at primary level. Once you detect those, give them support in terms of training in primary, secondary, and then you also create institutions where those who have been detected to have that talent, you put them in those institutions. They do both. They can do football, they can do sports at the same time as they study their academics. Once you detect them early and you give them adequate support in terms of equipment, in terms of good coaches, in terms of financing, then you'll get those who are talented and you'll develop them to their maximum potential. And when you do that, it not only helps them as individuals, but also helps the country, because they have got talent which we develop to regional, international levels. There'll be those who are good in marathon, those who are going to be good in sprints, there are also going to be those who are good in football and other sports, maybe volleyball, maybe basketball, maybe cricket, whatever it is. Now, once you develop them, and they reach a level where they get medals, gold medals, silver medals, bronze medals, it advertises the country. That's also a benefit. besides the support to individuals and their families. That's something that anybody who is really wants to develop a population, you must develop a country all around. You develop people. No, you don't only develop them in terms of lifting them out of poverty and ensuring that they can create wealth, but also develop them in areas where they have talent, because most times emotional satisfaction or the manner in which people feel satisfied, many times it is just beyond money as well. You can imagine how many young people lose their talent just because nobody has recognized them, nobody has given them support. So it's not only in sports, it's also in other areas where people have talent. There are those who are singers, there are those who are, different things. There are those who are sculptors. If you target them at between 5 and 10, you'll be able to understand who has talent where, and then you develop those talents.
Yes. Maybe General, we now summarize this conversation before I let the room back to my colleague in the studio to wind up with this particular show. In just a minute or two, as you look at driving this country, what are the things you stand on?
The first thing we would start off with is integrity in leadership. Men and women who are honest, who care about the country, who care about people. That's the first thing you do. You create a team. And then you focus resources in education. Education is the utmost source of wealth for a country. If they are in smaller scale industries, they're able to perform there at the best of their capabilities. Whichever sector they are in, all these other things you do is support them to develop themselves as well as to develop the country in those sectors.
Okay, thank you very much. This has been the conversation with the ANT's presidential candidate, retired Major General Mugisha Muntu, and of course he happens to be so far the 5th presidential candidate after, that is FDC's Nandala Mafab. You talk about NOPS, Robert Chagulanyi. You talk about NRM's Yoweri Kaguta Museveni. You talk about, that is a Common Man's Party, that is Mbaraka Munyagwa, who are also here seeking for votes so far in the districts that I've covered within West Nile sub-region. And of course, he has been able to give us very substantial information concerning the affairs of this particular country. And these are amongst the great men and women who are trying to see how they can be in position to shape the future of this nation. For now, allow me to say that this is where we're ending with the conversation, but of course he's continuing with his campaign trails right here in the West Nile sub-region, and we shall keep bringing you time-to-time updates as far as these particular campaigns are concerned ahead of the 2026 general elections. Since time is a very important variable here, allow me to say that let the room back to you in the studio to continue with the normal programming on this particular show.